this on? Can anybody hear me? Okay, hi. Wow. There's so many of you here. If I sound a little bit incoherent today, it's because of the jet lag. So I apologize in advance. I just crossed the international date line like yesterday. I'm still working on it. But thank you all for being here. This is an incredible display of support, and thank you to AWS and the whole team for putting this event together. There's very little, let me put it this way. There's never been a better time in history to be an entrepreneur. There are more entrepreneurs operating today than at any time in history. And part of the reason is because of the underlying trends that we're talking about today, of which cloud is one manifestation. And I don't think there is any company that has done more to promote the creation of startups in this phenomenon than Amazon. So I thank you, Werner, for your work. It really is great to be here. Now, let's go back to our old Karl Marx in order to understand what this is all about. Anyone remember the ownership of the means of production from old political philosophy class? That what gave people power in a previous economic arrangement was the ownership of the means of production. Well, I think Karl Marx would be pretty freaked to find out that now we can rent the means of production. So if you have a credit card anywhere in the world, then you have the opportunity to have infrastructure that lets you compete as a peer with even the world's largest companies. Isn't that cool? Now, to our colleagues who are here from big established companies, that's probably cool. It's not the first word that came to their minds. And that's OK. That is just the reality that we all live in. So anyway, the reason people love cloud is because it saves them money at first. But the reason I love cloud is because cloud is like a fertilizer that creates startups, which I guess I don't have to preach to the choir anymore. I just thought it's very cool to be here and talking about that. So let's see if this is working. No. OK, can't get a next slide. There we go. Hey, that's exciting. OK, I guess I have to stand over here. So that's how to get in touch with me. I did write this book, which hopefully you all got a copy of. And let's just discuss some quick ground rules. I hope my hosts won't mind. Earlier there was an announcement to turn your phones off, but I think that was a mistake. So actually, if anyone made the mistake of turning your phone off, if you turn it back on, I don't actually want your undivided attention. OK, this wasn't a joke. I was serious. So take your phone out of your pocket and hold it in your hand. It's not that hard. Everyone has a phone, right? I mean, I know it's Australia and they do things differently, but OK, I'm just checking. I don't want to give offense, but in your hand, please feel free to tweet amongst yourselves. Just please use the correct hashtag. We're Lean Cloud today. But 24/7, at every hour of the day, every day of the week, there is a global conversation about these ideas happening on the Lean Startup hashtag. So if you have a question, if something I say strikes you as bizarre or strange or stupid, you can discuss it with millions of other people around the world. Just tweet Lean Startup. And then you can kind of chat amongst yourselves if I get boring, OK? And with the jet lag, I'm especially worried about that. So if you wouldn't mind, please, everybody on Twitter. So phones in hands, yes? I can't really see what's happening. I'll trust that you actually listened to what I had to say. So I wanted to share a few ideas from the book, these 5, that entrepreneurs are everywhere. Behold, here I am in Australia, and we're in the live stream in Singapore, Korea, people from India, the Philippines, everywhere in the world tweeting me to say that they are tuned in. So thank you all for watching. That entrepreneurship is management. That the unit of progress of entrepreneurship is something called validated learning, that we can steer a startup using the build, measure, learn feedback loop, and that we can hold entrepreneurs accountable using innovation accounting. And I usually have to pause here and apologize because a lot of you traveled a great distance to come to what was supposed to be this hot, cool, exciting talk about cutting-edge entrepreneurship, right? And what are we going to talk about? But probably the most boring concepts in the universe, like management and accounting. So sorry about that. We are going to be talking about the boring parts of entrepreneurship. If anyone feels like it was a bit of a bait and switch, you know, the exit is here. There are actually people outside who'd be happy to get in, so please feel free. I think we have to get serious about the boring parts of entrepreneurship. Now, if you watch a movie about entrepreneurship or read a magazine profile about an entrepreneur, you're familiar with the classic story. Who saw the movie The Social Network? Just a quick show of hands. Pretty good. Or who saw my favorite entrepreneurship movie of all time, Ghostbusters? Anybody? Oh, we got a few Ghostbusters fans in the room. Excellent. Good. If you think about Ghostbusters, yes, it does deal with the paranormal to some amount, but it's really a movie about entrepreneurship. You have the guys in the university with their cool new technology, you know, ahead of their time, get kicked out of the university, and what do? They mortgage their house, and they get the building, and they get the technology working, and they do the TV ad, remember, and then the cool car and all that stuff. And that's all Act 1 of the entrepreneurship movie. Who are these crazy protagonists? How do they come to have the right idea, be in the right place at the right time? And then what are their interesting character quirks and defects that will be important later, right? Act 1. And then right at the end of Act 1, maybe they're starting to run out of money. Anyone remember in Ghostbusters what happens? They're down to their very last dollar. Things are looking grim. And then just on the very day they're about to go out of business, their first customer walks right in the door. And you're like, well, isn't that really good timing? Like, I was very good. If the customer comes in the door a little later, they're already out of business. And you think about, well, wait, why did the customer, anyone remember the movie, why the customer walked in the door right then? It's because, for those that don't remember, it's because Zool is invading Manhattan today, that day. And you think, wow, Zool has amazing timing. Because how did he know to invade right on the last, right? Now, most entrepreneurs I know are actually stuck in Act 1, busy as we speak, waiting for Zool. They just figure you get down to your last dollar and your customers will arrive. And we all know in real life, not so much. But in the movies, as soon as Act 1 is done, we move right into Act 2, what we call the photo montage. Lasts, 60 seconds, 120 seconds. No dialogue in the photo montage, just a few images of entrepreneurs typing on some keyboards, or in the social network, they write on those cool whiteboard pens on the windows. That's what entrepreneurship looks like, we all know. Anyway, by the end of the photo montage, you're basically on the cover of magazines. So like from first customer to cover of magazines, and we can move on to Act 3, the really exciting stuff, like what kind of car are you going to drive, who sues who, and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Now, here's my question. Why is it that the photo montage is only 2 minutes long and has no dialogue, when in reality, probably 95% of all important decisions that affect the outcomes of startups happens during the photo montage? It's because, I would like to posit, that those activities are too boring to make it into the movie. Think about what's actually in the photo montage. Who's been in a product prioritization meeting recently? Anybody? Okay, come on, hands up. Come on, who was in a product prioritization? Yeah, thank you. Okay, who feels like that would make a really good movie? So interesting, right? It's things like trying to figure out which customer do we listen to and which one do we ignore, or my favorite, whether we should pivot or persevere our strategy, okay? That is not movie-worthy material. That is really excruciatingly boring stuff, and yet those are the decisions that actually impact the success of entrepreneurs. So if we're going to get good at entrepreneurship, we have to get good at the boring stuff, hence management and accounting. So let's start with entrepreneurs are everywhere. This is not working. All right, if we're going to get better at entrepreneurship, it helps to start with a rigorous definition. So here's mine. A startup is a human institution designed to create something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty. Vernon did a great job, wherever he went, of describing that uncertainty that we all live in, that gives some of us heartburn and for the rest of us spells opportunity. What I think is most important about this definition is that it says nothing about the size of your company, what kind of noodles you eat, ramen noodles or otherwise, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what kind of office you have or what kind of benefits you get at work. Fundamentally, it is about trying to create something new that has never existed before when we don't even know who the customer is going to be. We don't know what market we're in. We don't know what the product will be, which is a fancy way of saying that a startup is an experiment. Now, I mean experiment in the scientific sense. It is a hypothesis about something that might become a sustainable business. But it is not ye old 20th century style experiment that was primarily about, well, can it be built? If you look at the history of the great entrepreneurs of the 20th century, oftentimes the level of technical risk was incredibly high. And when you saw the pitch for the new idea, you said, gosh, is it even possible to build such a thing? Well, we live in a time, especially those of us in software, but increasingly in every kind of technology, where we can build anything we can imagine. So the question of our time is not, can it be built, but should it be built? And I have bad news. We're not actually very good at answering that question. And so our problem is that we are busy, as we speak, wasting people's time on an industrial scale. Now, I understand that your startup is going to be successful. Okay? I understand. We're in a room full of entrepreneurs. I understand your startup is fine, but the person to your left and the person to your right, okay, or your friend, let's start thinking about their startup. But I thought, because we're all such optimists, and I honor that, I thought I would bring a demonstration to illustrate what I mean. Now, we know in our bones that most startups fail, okay, that we just take that for granted. But I really think that just assuming that that's just the way it is because startups are risky leads us to some really bad behaviors. And I don't know if anyone remembers this chart. Anyone seen this before? Remember when Web 2.0 was cool? Right? There was a time in the ye old dark ages of the internet, I think from like 2006, when we thought Web 2.0 was going to be the hot new thing. It was very exciting. And at that time, in my hometown of San Francisco, man, you could not walk down the street without people talking to you about Web 2.0 this, Web 2.0 that. We were very excited about it, and we shared our enthusiasm with everyone in the world. So I take it that's why people were laughing a moment ago. Sorry about that. And a graphic designer was so excited about the possibility of Web 2.0 that they put together this kind of manifesto flag of all the logos of all the Web 2.0 companies. And then 3 years later, in 2009, okay, so exactly 3 years have elapsed, a different graphic designer decided to update the famous manifesto like so. This is in just 3 years. And if you look at all the blood red X's, okay, those are the companies that are dead already in 3 years, which I think is pretty shocking. But check out, I don't know if you can see this in the back, some of these companies are marked with green circles. That are supposed to be the success stories of Web 2.0, which in this case, the definition of the chart was very funny. It was like companies that have either gone public or been acquired by a larger company, which is hilarious because every single one of them is just acquired by a larger company because we're talking about Web 2.0. And those of you in large companies will know that when a startup gets acquired by a larger company, everything always works out great every time, right? Yeah, no, often the product exits along with the founders and the investors. So, and then some of these companies are unmarked. They're still alive. Hallelujah. In 2009, at least still alive. How many of those companies are actually stuck in the land of the living dead? The worst outcome of all, right? Not actually succeeding, but not allowing people to leave because they're still around like zombies. Okay? So now ask yourself on this chart, think about the collective amount of money, time, energy, passion, determination, poured into these companies by every one of these founders. Think of all the employees and investors working to make these companies work. And ask yourself, in how many of these cases was this actually a success in terms of living up to that raw investment of energy and, more importantly, of time? And see, I think by that higher standard, we are doing abysmally bad. And I like Web 2.0 because of the thing I was just saying a moment ago. There's not one company on this list where you look at it and be like, gosh, can that be built? Like, I want to make you a social network for dogs. Is it possible? Can it be done? Of course it can be done. The question is, for all of these companies, should it be done? And why did we have to invest, launch, and watch fail company after company when the fundamental problem was simply that people didn't want the product? So I want to try to convince you that entrepreneurship is a kind of management designed to answer that question. But I feel like as a matter of disclaimer, I should say that if my companies that I've built in my career were on that chart, most of them would be marked with the red X. And I know you're not supposed to say that kind of thing when you're a professional expert such as myself, and a very kind host is phoning you all the way to Australia to tell people what they should do. Hi, everybody. I'm a big failure. Most of the companies I've ever built in my whole life, most of the products I have ever worked on or touched with my bare hands have failed. And if you follow me, you too can be a big failure. I know you're not supposed to say that kind of thing, I know, but so I'm sorry to our host, it's the truth. And in fact, anyone who's telling you the truth about entrepreneurship better be talking to you about failure, or else they're trying to sell you something. Now, it has to be somebody's fault, okay? And naturally, not my fault. Just like I know your companies are fine, not my fault. And it's ideal if you're a professional expert such as myself for the person whose fault it is to be somebody dead, because then they can't talk back. So I blame this guy. A man named Frederick Winslow Taylor, an American who lived in the early part of the 20th century. And today, he's remembered for some of his more discredited ideas, like time and motion studies and the ideas that workers were basically sophisticated automata and all kinds of other not so great ideas. And the reason we remember him that way is because his actual breakthrough ideas are to us so obvious, we can't even imagine that they had to be invented in the first place. Okay, so let me illustrate. Who feels like it is controversial, the following idea? Work should be done as efficiently as possible. Okay, I want you to imagine a homework assignment. I would like you to write a polemic in favor of the idea that work should be done efficiently, and ask yourself, who's on the other side of that polemic? What are the counter-arguments to consider? We consider that to be completely obvious, and yet that was an idea that had to be invented. My favorite of the Taylor breakthroughs was something he called the task plus bonus system, but we just call tasks. See if you can wrap your mind around this. Here's the idea. If you have a project that needs to be done, the best way to go about it is to hire a professional manager to study the problem, decompose the project into a series of tasks, farm those tasks out to functional specialists in functional departments, what we would now call modern departmental silos. Each of those people focuses on doing their job as good as possible so that they do the same kind of job over and over again. And then, here's the best part. If someone finds a way to do their task better than anticipated, they should be paid a bonus instead of being penalized. Again, your homework assignment, write a polemic in favor of this system and ask yourself, who thinks they should be penalized? In the 19th century, workers were paid on what they call the differential piece rate system, which meant that if you found a better way to do your job, then what could we conclude about you? Well, obviously that you're a liar. You're a person of low moral character. Why? You could have been doing the job better this whole time, but obviously weren't. So you should be penalized. Now, I'm thinking about this. What do we know about your coworkers who are all still doing it the old way? Liars, a lot of them, right? They all could have been doing it the best. So penalize everybody. So I want you to visualize a management system of collective punishment for productivity improvement. That used to be considered state of the art, and now it's only in Dilbert. Okay, so that's a huge advance. We've made a lot of progress in the intervening time, but this system has been, in a lot of ways, too successful. The reason we can build anything we can imagine is because we now live in a time where the global supply chains that the general managers of the world, using these principles, have put together, have given us more capacity than we know what to do with. But there's a problem with general management, which is that all of the tools of general management are fundamentally based on planning and forecasting. Okay, everyone knows that if you are ahead of plan, you should be promoted, and behind plan, fired. If your earnings report is better than you analysts predicted, then your stock price goes up, otherwise goes down. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Okay, that's the whole system of functional departments and making people's rewards based on their productivity. All of that traces back to planning and forecasting. But if you think about that, making an accurate forecast depends on having a long and stable operating history from which to extrapolate, right? And who feels like the world is getting more and more stable every day? Yeah, no one ever raised their hand that part, right? But what's happening is that the environment that all of us operate is pushing us out of the domain of general management and into the domain of what I call entrepreneurial management. And so what we need is a new toolkit that is designed specifically for entrepreneurs like us to actually figure out what the hell is going on. And when we try to apply the tools of general management in an entrepreneurial context, it doesn't work very well. Now, this entrepreneurial management toolkit needs to be geared specifically to the conditions of extreme uncertainty that all entrepreneurs face. If you're building a fundamentally new product, like what could be more uncertain than that? But also, if you're building a product just like the one you built before, but the world has changed out from under you, then you're also an entrepreneur no matter what it says on your business card. I got to learn this the hard way because I don't know if you noticed, I just published a book. And there's an industry that has not yet gotten the memo. So got to learn all about that. Very interesting. So in the toolkit of entrepreneurial management, there is one tool above all others that is most important. It's called the pivot. I guess, probably nominated for most overused buzzword of the last year, for which I apologize. Just as an aside, I saw this cartoon. I kid you not. I actually saw this cartoon in the New Yorker magazine. I don't know if you can read this caption. I'm not leaving you. I'm pivoting to another man. I know, it's embarrassing. Sorry about that. Anyway. I can't believe we didn't have this concept before. It is so fundamental to entrepreneurship, so I understand why people got a little overexcited about it. If you get the real stories of any entrepreneurial success story, you will discover that the successful entrepreneurs did not have better ideas than the unsuccessful entrepreneurs. Their ideas were equally crazy at the beginning. What happened is that when successful entrepreneurs run into difficulty with their crazy idea, they don't just give up and go home, but neither do they persevere the plane into the ground through stubbornness. They do this funny thing where they're able to take some element of what they had learned and change other elements of the strategy at a time. So a pivot is a change in strategy without a change in vision. And the premise of the lean startup is actually very simple. If you think about how much runway a startup has left, the right way to think about that is not in terms of time, like how many months of burn do we have left. The right way to think about runway is how many opportunities do we have to pivot remaining. And if you want to increase runway, sure, you can raise more money, as if that's really easy to do, or you can find ways to get to the moment of pivoting a little bit sooner. And every time you've done that in a systematic way, you've actually magically extended your runway without having to raise more money, which is why lean startups are more capital efficient. Like I said, it doesn't matter what kind of noodles you eat. It matters the mentality, the methodology that you bring to bear on the problem. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's talk about validated learning. In most of the companies that I have built in my career, the unit of progress was advancing the plan. Right? You make a brilliant plan. I once built a company where we had a business plan that was so beautiful. I mean, you would weep if you read it. Okay, this was, I mean, it was just so well done. It was genius, if I do say so myself. And the business plan made some predictions about the future, like that we would have this incredible hockey stick shaped graph after launch. Right? Everyone knows the hockey stick shape. In Canada, people got very excited about this. Elsewhere, not as much. But the hockey stick shape, even in Australia, people know what it is. Okay. The most salient feature of the hockey stick shape is the long, flat part, right? And then you get the big up. If you just go up at the front day one, it's not a hockey stick. So the plan said, launch the product and observe the hockey stick. And for the first 6 or 9 months after launching this product, we were like, this plan is genius. It says we should have almost no customers, and we do. Okay, that's funny. It's funny. Of course, it's funny about me. But then a question for you or your friend, right, is if I'm on a hockey stick extrapolated graph, how do I know if I'm about to turn up and to the right or I'll be on the long, flat part forever? See, the plan didn't answer that question. It just said we would have this turning up at the beginning. And the problem with those plans and believing those plans is they lead to this result, which I call achieving failure. That company didn't fail because we didn't execute the plan well. It failed because the plan was stupid. But the plan didn't say, and there's no part in the plan where it said, hey, by the way, check if this plan is any good. The whole point of the plan was to make an argument that everyone would read and weep and believe, oh, yeah, it is good. It's as logical as it comes. In fact, sounds good are the most dangerous words an entrepreneur can ever utter. Right? The plan seemed reasonable. It seemed right. And so my question for us to think about today is if we're in the process of building something that nobody wants, why are we so proud that we did it on time and on budget? Okay, why do we go to startup board meetings? That's all we're ever talking about is how we are right on plan, we hit the milestones, everything's going just like we said it was going to do. And it's like we're driving a car right off a cliff and bragging about the excellent gas mileage that we get. Right? It's like, so our engine, very efficient. That's Fred Taylorism taking us over that cliff. And yet, what should we spend our board meetings talking about? How do we figure out if we're actually making progress or just achieving failure? Well, one answer comes from these gentlemen. The word lean in lean startup, as Werner already talked about, comes from a thing called lean manufacturing, which started in Japan. Men like Deming and Taiichi Ohno figured out that if we re-examine every aspect of our business through the eyes of our customer, we can discover which activities are value-creating and which ones are wasteful, and then eliminate the waste. Doesn't that seem like a good idea? Deming is famous for having said, the customer is the most important part of the production line. And when I learned these ideas in the software world, they were called agile development. And if you look at most agile development systems, it's about taking the customer and bringing them closer in to the development process, whether the customer is directly sitting with the engineers as an XP or is represented by a product owner or a product manager who knows the customer extremely well. And that system works extremely well if you know who the customer is. But if you don't, who are you going to sit with your engineers? See, then you substitute the plan. You're like, well, the plan said that our customer will be this. And what that really, the plan was very confident in its language. These plans always are. Very bold pronouncements about what customers will want. But actually, every plan should have a little asterisk after every sentence, which is like asterisk at the bottom, we hope. Right? We guess, we believe, maybe, possibly these. So we're operating on a series of guesses. That's not good enough to run this system. So I'll give you an example. I built a company in 2004 called ImView, which actually has been somewhat successful. And we built a product for 3D avatar communication. And this was before the movie Avatar and before avatars were very cool. This was a company that was called ImView, IMVU, because we wanted to create a new instant messaging network. And in those days, instant messaging was the hot, cool social technology. And we wanted to like make the next AOL back when that was still cool. Okay, that's our aspiration. So we did this analysis, strategic analysis, that any good MBA would know how to do. What do we know about instant messaging? It is a network effects business. Therefore, if you want to switch from one instant messaging network to another, that means you got to bring all your friends with you, which is kind of a pain. So there's high switching costs. And therefore, in the language of MBAs, we would say instant messaging is a business characterized by high barriers to entry. Right? You can't just bring a new IM client to market because everyone already has an IM network. See where I'm going with this? So a strategic brilliance to get around this problem. We shall create an instant messaging add-on that interoperates with all of the existing instant messaging networks. In fact, we went so far as to build technology where we would add an extra button to everybody else's IM client. So you could just click a button, say, go 3D. And then you wouldn't have to learn a new IM network. You could use it with your friends to hang out online. In fact, every time you push that button, we would automatically send a link, an invitation to join our product to the other person that you're chatting with. So can you visualize ImView spreading like a virus? right? All through the existing IM networks is everyone, you have to use it with a friend in order to use it at all. Therefore, it has to spread virally. Doesn't that sound good? Are you a little suspicious? I hope. When I lecture, by the way, in MBA classrooms, which I do quite often these days, that's the only part of my talk the MBA is not along to. It's like, now someone's speaking my language, okay? I don't know what this guy's been talking about, but that is sound strategic analysis right out of the textbook. And that actually is a really good strategic analysis, except for a tiny, tiny detail, which is that every single thing I just told you is not true. But it sounds good. Now, here's the problem. We had 6 months to build this product. And we had this analysis, and we said, OK, we're going to launch this product in 6 months. That was our kind of deadline that we gave ourselves. And I was the CTO of this company, so it was my job to, build all that software that did that strategy that I just told you. And those of you who are engineers in the room or on the webcast can start to do what we call the scope math in your mind, right? Everyone knows time, quality, money, pick two. And so we didn't have any money, and we set ourselves a hard deadline, so what's going to happen. We try to get this massive product, 3D avatars, micropayments, online socializing, all the blogging features, social networking features, instant messaging features. It's all user-generated content, so authorship. You can imagine 6 months is not enough time for our tiny team to actually do a good job building all those features. And so quality suffered a little bit, which is sophisticated engineering speak for this product totally sucked. Okay? But when we get to those 6 months and launch this product, it would be much more likely to crash your computer than it would be to give you some kind of delightful 3D avatar experience. All right. And I was a little bit nervous because I'm the CTO, and I had plenty of advisors who were like, you cannot launch this product. It is terrible. It will crash people's computers. Your reputation will be ruined. And my co-founders and I were sitting there being like, oh my God, we're going to launch this product, and then some journalist is going to find it. Some investigative journalist will write this big article. Idiots at IMVU don't know what quality means. Subtitle, never hire them again. Arrow pointing at my mugshot in the paper. That was kind of what we were visualizing. Very scary. But we had just spent, the previous company, spending years of our lives achieving failure, building something that not even a single person wanted. And so we were like, no, we're just going to put it out there, and we will see what happens. And so, we launched the product. And I kid you not, this is not a joke, I really, honestly was relieved when it turned out that no one would even try it. Okay? No one even wanted to download the product. So actually, nobody's computer was crashed. Nobody found out how bad our design decisions were. And I'm like, phew, dodged a bullet. And then it's like, well, hold on, wait. What? What's going on here? Now, I was a little bit nervous because when we started to bring customers in to look at our product, we're like, we can understand why they're not downloading it. Let's bring them in for like a usability test, figure out what's going on. You got a picture like a teenage girl, the kind of person that wants to use this product with their friends. Come in, sit down, and we say, OK, download this instant messaging add-on. And they'd be like, what is that? Is it an instant messaging network? I'm like, no, it interoperates with all the other networks to avoid the network effects and switching costs. She's like, I don't understand what that is. So no, I decline your offer to download this thing. And we're like, listen, kid, we are paying you to be here. So you'll, run, and they're like, OK, fine, install it, try it. They love the avatar part of it. That's cool. And then we'd be like, OK, invite one of your friends to chat with you. And they'd be like, no. Why not? Well, I don't know if this thing is cool yet, and so I don't know if I want to invite one of my friends to something that's not cool. By the way, somewhere there's like a list of commandments of mission-critical software. Somewhere on that list is do not ever, ever make a teenager look dumb in front of their friends, right? It's like very important. So they wouldn't try it. And we're like, listen, we're paying you to be here, so you'll do it. And they're like, yeah, no, thank you. Okay? You can keep your money, old man. I am not going to be letting it to look lame in front of my friends. So think about that. We can't even pay people to use this product. Not good. And of course, the first time that happened, you know exactly what I said. I'm the CTO. Where did you find this customer? Right? Fire that customer, get me another one. Second customer, same thing happens. Third customer, now the engineer in me is like, well, hold on, is this a statistically significant sample? Okay, yes. Yes, it is. Right? Because sample size is a function not just of the size of the sample, but also the underlying signal-to-noise ratio of the thing being measured, right? And this ain't no presidential election where 1/10 of a point, right? We're talking about people who can't even be paid to use the product, okay? That was significant. So anyway, to make a long and painful story short, we realized we had to pivot, and the instant messaging add-on concept had to be thrown away, and we had to switch to standalone instant messaging network, and actually that worked great, and we built our own social network, and MVU was a big success, and blah, blah, blah. But now let's sympathize with me for a minute, okay? Because whose software had to be thrown away when the pivot happened? That would be me. I personally wrote thousands and thousands of lines of code to do all that instant messaging operability to make that strategy a reality. And it had to be thrown away. And I'd done it all lean and agile. Good test coverage, for those who know what I'm talking about. Very well-factored code, if I do say so myself. Just the right level of documentation, really good APIs, service-oriented architecture, whatever. And in fact, not every line is uniformly good. So there's some good code, there's some bad code. Well, it all got thrown away. Right? Failure is the great equalizer of quality. It didn't matter. The code that was under test coverage got thrown away, and the code that I never got around, it didn't matter. All got thrown away. And I was depressed. Because it's like, wait a minute, why did I even have to be here? Right? If all my work got thrown away, like, couldn't my co-founders have just done the work, and I could have just been on a beach somewhere on a vacation? What do I need to be doing this for? And I was like, okay. I have a thought process that will be familiar to some of you. When you have a huge failure, and you're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel of excuses, for the last excuse in the barrel to be justify your horrible failure, you can always say it with me now, we learned something important, right? Incidentally, a manager in most companies that claims to have learned something is about to get fired. Because it means that either you didn't make a very good plan, or the horrible sin, you made a good plan and didn't execute it. So, that's a double fire that guy. So anyway, that's not I understand why learning is not exactly the most popular concept in managerial and entrepreneurial circles, but that was the only excuse I had left, and I said, okay, make myself feel better, which was I had to learn something very important about customers, namely that they couldn't even pay them to use this product, so that was good learning. Therefore, the time I spent building this product was justified, and I felt better until I had the following thought that kept me awake, actually bolt upright in the middle of the night, which was hold on, wait a second. If my goal the last 6 months was to learn this thing about customers, why did it take 6 months? How come the word learning is only coming up now at the end as an excuse? My co-founders and I never used the word learning with each other. You know exactly what we spent our time doing, those of you who are founders. What did we spend our time doing? We spent our time arguing about what? What features absolutely have to be in version 1 and which ones could we live without? Which bugs do we absolutely positively have to fix, or which ones can we leave in there, right? Which customers are we trying to target? And of course, what kind of car are we going to drive when we're really successful? The word learning doesn't come up, we're not talking about learning, but that doesn't really make sense. For example, we supported 12 different instant messaging networks in that first version, because we wanted to have ubiquitous viral distribution through all networks. But would the learning have been the same with only 6 networks? What about with only 3 networks, or only 1? Right? The learning that people don't want any networks? The same. But that's already an order of magnitude reduction in the amount of code we would have had to write. And then I had this thought, which I found very disturbing. What if we hadn't built any software at all, but just had created a single web page with a screenshot of the product we proposed to build and a giant download button? Would we even have had to create page 2, where we apologize that there's no software available? Think it through. What did I say before? I said they wouldn't even try the product. That means they literally wouldn't click the download button, which means it doesn't matter what's on page 2 or page 10. It doesn't matter what the first-time user experience is once they download. It doesn't matter what's in the 20th hour of their experience. It doesn't matter how much money. None of that matters because we can't even get people past the first step. And now I was really depressed. Okay? How is it possible that one day's work that some web designer could have done, it had the same value to the company of my 6 months of awesome technology that I built? That doesn't seem right. And, I had a business card. I pulled out my business card, and I looked at it, and it said, Eric Ries, Chief Technology Officer. Okay, it did not say Chief Crappy Landing Page One-Day Designer Experiment Officer. Right? So it was like undermining my own sense of what my value that I could bring to the company was. And yet I contend that learning that we got from the product is the value the company got from my work. And so the right way to think about what to build in a startup is not how do I achieve the specification at minimum effort. That's what we've all been trained to do as functional specialists. That's Taylorism 101. Instead, we have to say, what experiment am I trying to run? And then how do I achieve that learning with minimum effort? That's where the breakthrough improvements in productivity come from. Because it can be the case that a one-day experiment has the same learning value as 6 months of technology. And if we take that seriously, that means that the unit of progress is this thing we call validated learning. Not just a talented, not just a good story, because all entrepreneurs are skilled at telling stories, but actual quantitative analytic proof that we actually are figuring out what customers want. So the way to visualize that is like this, what we call a build, measure, learn feedback loop. All of you software companies are nothing more than catalysts that transform ideas into code. Everything else is a side effect, including the pizza and the Mountain Dew, everything, right? Just side effects. When customers interact with our code, we can measure generating data about them, which we can use to influence our next set of ideas. So very simple, three-stage feedback loop. Most of us have been trained to get really good at one of these activities. So when I was an engineer, I often used this argument with my partners and marketing people, anyone who would listen. They're like, listen, I can code faster if I don't have to waste time on data warehousing. Okay, like there's all this extra code and instrumentation and generating these reports. Who cares? Our customers don't care how good our reports are. They only care how good our product is, right? And so therefore, like, I don't have to worry about that stuff. And the problem with that argument is that it's 100% true. You can code faster if you don't measure, in the same way that you can drive faster if you just close your eyes and floor the accelerator. That will get the car moving. But is that our goal? No. And all of us have this problem, right? Those of us who work in analytics and data warehousing, it's like, well, if measuring some things is good, measuring more things is better. If we're trying to, be really good MBAs and we like, doing strategic analysis at the whiteboard, we can often learn a lot by iterating those boxes and diagrams all over the place in a fact-free zone of pure speculation. All of those things optimize for a local part of this process, but as I say in systems theory, that which optimizes the subpart necessarily suboptimizes the whole, which is really fancy language for saying that everything we decide to do as entrepreneurs should be geared towards minimizing this fundamental cycle time. And this can actually save us an incredible amount of time trying to make sense of all the horrible startup advice we get all the time. And now, especially now with the internet, I mean, you can consume startup advice 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's all mutually contradictory. Right? So everyone knows that startup has to have really good design. Steve Jobs wouldn't put out a product unless it was excellently designed, except for all these great successful startups whose design kind of sucks, like eBay and Craigslist. And you're like, oh, well, their design doesn't, so I guess it doesn't matter. So I guess, right, design is really important, and also it doesn't matter. Got it. Like, check. And we really got to make sure that our app is scalable from day one, because you don't want to be like Friendster and actually have a success, and then it blows up because it's not scalable, and then not only do you fail, but it's like your fault. That's the worst, except that Facebook wasn't that scalable at all. They just kind of did it along the way, and that's fine. So you're like, got it. Scalability critical, and also don't worry about it. Check. And everything's like that. It's like, well, how much infrastructure should we have? How big should our team be? How many features should we have? When should we launch? It's like, yes, make sure you do it. For any piece of advice, I can find you examples of a startup that did that and was successful, a startup that didn't do that and was successful, a startup that did it and was unsuccessful, and a startup that didn't do it and was unsuccessful, right? All 4 combinations. So how do you make sense of all that advice? Now, when I was with my co-founders, I'd be sitting with my CEO, and we'd hear some lecture that would have this contradictory advice in it, and he'd be like, go execute that. And I'd be like, well, which one? Design or not design? So he'd be like, yeah, all of them. Just, learn from all the best entrepreneurs, do what they did, and we'll be fine. And I'm like, but how do I know? He's like, well, that's your job. Just figure out which amount of design. And it was totally useless. What am I supposed to do? How do you know that what worked for some other person will work for you? How do you know that what worked in their time will work in your time? What works in their industry works in your industry? How do we make sense of all these different tactics? Well, I believe this gives us a heuristic, for evaluating what to do. Any activity that right now will help us learn faster is value creating, and anything else is waste. So there are a ton of specific techniques to lean startup, each of which operate at one stage of this feedback loop, but I believe have the net effect of minimizing total time. So take what is probably the most controversial tool in the Lean Startup Toolkit, something called continuous deployment, where we put software into production as fast as it can be written. At InView, we've publicly talked about how we do it about 50 times a day on average. And I always like to look around because there'll be some engineer who hasn't heard that before, and they're like, wait a minute. I did not sign up for this. Like, who is this crazy guy? That doesn't make sense. That's much too fast. We should do, a monthly, weekly, release cycle, or XP's 2-week cycles, Scrum's in 1 month. That's more efficient. And it's actually not more efficient. It's much less efficient to work in those giant batches. And we don't have time today. We can talk in the Q&A. People are interested in the mechanics of how you do it. But actually, technically, driving down the batch size of development is not that hard. What's hard is trying to figure out, well, why would you want to do it? Because it seems like it would be more efficient to work much slower. Well, if you start to think about this feedback loop, there's all these features out there that take longer to prioritize than they do to build. Okay, you know what I'm talking about, right? You could sit there, argue about it for days on end, should it get it into the roadmap or not, or we could just build the experiment, ship it, and find out the actual data about whether customers want it or not. If you value learning, you will optimize for getting that feedback as quickly as possible. If you value Taylor-style productivity, that is cranking out code and feeling like you did a good job, then you will value working in large batches. Does that make sense? All of these techniques have that same flavor. They're actually not that difficult to learn. What's difficult is figuring out the mindset of why you would want to do them in the first place. And so I don't want to get into those techniques today, although if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them. There's a lot of great resources online. Instead, I want to talk about what is the foundation that will allow us to make that transformation in mindset, because that's actually what the stakes of this are. You can have all the cloud services in the world. You can have all the amazing infrastructure, but if you still apply the same methodology as before, you will get the same results. So that's why I want to talk about accounting. And I know people have been like waiting with bated breath. When are we going to get to the accounting part? That's the most fun. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. But if we don't have an accounting revolution, we can't have an entrepreneurial revolution. And the reason these thoughts were inspired by this diagram. This is from an amazing book about Toyota and about the lean manufacturing revolution called The Toyota Way. And basically, there's a lot of information here. You can read this book if you want to learn more. But everyone likes to talk about the process stuff from Toyota. If people have studied Toyota at all in an MBA program or just casually from the pop culture, you'll have learned about things like the famous andon cord that you pull. It stops the production line if you see a problem. Or some people will know about Kanban or Kaizen, all these cool Japanese words mean all kinds of cool stuff. That stuff's really important. And that process level is a necessary part of what Toyota's done. But it is not the foundation. The foundation is Toyota's philosophy of long-term thinking that creates the right incentives for people to be willing to invest in all that infrastructure and change. And we as entrepreneurs have to learn this lesson if we're going to get good at entrepreneurship. And I was thinking about, all right, if that's the Toyota way, you know, Toyota, with all due respect, hasn't been a startup for almost 100 years. What they do now is what they call sustaining innovation, making things that they've done before better, not disruptive innovation. That's what we're all trying to work on today. So what is the startup way? And I drew this diagram. We've been talking all day so far about process, all the infrastructure and measuring tools, all the stuff we're going to do to figure out if we're making progress. But all of that requires a foundation of accountability, or it's not going to work. Now, most of the time, I mean, process is a big improvement over what we talk about most of the time as entrepreneurs. Usually we're talking about how do I hire and retain the best people, who's the right kind of entrepreneurial person and who's not. Sometimes we talk about cultural factors. Just as an aside, my favorite of all-time piece of startup advice is that you should focus. You ever read those articles that come out like once a week? Like, focus is the most important thing. It's like telling a startup to focus. It's like telling an overweight person to lose weight. Like, yeah, no kidding. But how? Right? The advice is not what you should do, but how should we achieve that culture of focus? That is what all this process stuff is about, because the culture you have today is an artifact of the process decisions you made in the past. But we can't have a good process if we use the wrong kind of accountability. And let me try to explain. Visualize the beginning of a new project. Doesn't matter if you're a venture-backed entrepreneur negotiating with a VC, or you're an intrapreneur negotiating with your CFO, or you're a garage entrepreneur negotiating with your spouse. In all cases, the beginning looks like this. Hey, VC, CFO, honey, have I got a plan for you? If you give me, our whole life savings, or $1 million, and this team of 5, and a year, I promise you the most astounding results you've ever seen. I have this hockey stick-shaped graph in this plan. We're going to have billions of dollars in revenue and millions of customers. It'll be the greatest thing ever. Can I have it? And because we're all very good at selling those plans as entrepreneurs, we get the resources. Okay, so now we're off to the races. Now let's flash forward a year later. What do we know for sure? I contend that we know for sure that the money has been spent right on time. The money's gone. Somehow, where did it go? Always gone. I know for sure that everybody involved was very busy this time. So we hit milestones and we built stuff and we all ran around and we did a lot of activity. And if we're being totally honest, most of the time we will admit that we don't exactly have the kind of business results that we promised, right? Instead of billions of dollars in revenue, maybe we have thousands of dollars in revenue. Instead of hundreds of instead of millions of customers, we'll have hundreds of customers. Right? Not quite have the achievement that we promised. Just to give you a flavor of how painful this can be, when we were raising money the first time from venture capitalists at InView, we had another amazing hockey stick-shaped graph. Way better than the previous one that was just fake. This one was a real hockey stick. It started out at making $300 a month in revenue, and over the course of 9 months, it shot up to, I think, $7,000 or $8,000 a month in revenue. So very exciting graph. And we would take it into VC offices, and they would look at it. This is great. They love that hockey stick shape, man. This is awesome. What are the units on this graph? Is this in thousands? And we're like, no, it's in ones. And we got thrown out of a lot of offices because, like, what are you doing telling us this crap, right? Ones, give me a break. So, okay, things are not going well. Where it's like, okay, listen, honey, VC, CFO, remember when we promised you those amazing results? Not exactly. Didn't accomplish, any of them, but you see what's coming? Can you feel it in your bones? We have learned so much. We are on the brink of the most incredible entrepreneurial victory of all time. And if you just give us another year and $25 million this time, I promise you, that's when most entrepreneurs get fired. Right? That's like, yeah, Now, I want to just get in the minds of those CFOs and VCs who we love to deride as vulture capitalists, right? They're constantly pulling the plug on promising innovations right at the moment when they're about to take off. You know what I'm talking about? You ever had those conversations? I cannot believe how stupid they are. But let's look at it from their point of view just for a second. Let's imagine two hypothetical scenarios. One in which you are actually on the brink of mega success, and one in which you have spent that year goofing off, doing nothing, right? Just spending the company's money on nothing. In both cases, you would have a pathetically small number of customers. In both cases, you would have almost no revenue. From a gross analytics point of view, from the metrics of traditional accounting like profitability, margin, ROI, the two scenarios look exactly the same. So the reason we keep pulling the plug on these promising companies is because brink of success is indistinguishable from goofing off. And if you think about that, that is total paradigm breakdown in our accounting systems. We're not talking about, I wonder if it's an A+ or an A-, right? It's not like, is it a pretty good job or a very good job? We're talking about amazing job and worst job ever looks the same. That can't be right. So we forget that our accounting systems, which today we take for granted, we now think of accounting as like that thing you do to figure out where the money went, used to be the foundation of holding managers accountable. It goes all the way back to figuring out, hey, is this manager on plan? Right? The whole point is we use these principles to forecast what they're supposed to do, and then we can hold them accountable to doing what they said. Yet as entrepreneurs, we're going to have to pivot. We're always off plan. We're always going to fail on the way to success. We need our own separate accounting system that can help us figure out if we're making progress or not. I call it innovation accounting, not to be confused with innovative accounting, which can get you thrown in prison, so do please be careful. Innovation accounting. And I want to get us our attention taken away from product and business milestones and towards what I call learning milestones. So let's just do a quick exercise. Who here has ever written a business plan? Hands up. Come on. Okay, keep your hand up if the business plan had a spreadsheet in the back. Okay, keep your hand up if the spreadsheet in the back made projections for revenue through year 5. Keep your hand up if the revenue in year 5 was supposed to be at least $100 million. Oh, see, that's where Silicon Valley is really different. At this point, everyone's hand is still up. Like, keep your hands up, all the $100 million plans. Keep your hand up if you actually made at least $100 million by year 5. Anybody? Anybody? Silicon Valley is the same. All the hands go right down, yeah. So we're very good at making those plans, not as good at actually achieving them, hence achieving failure. Now, I'm going to make a prediction. This doesn't sound like magic. If I had your plan in front of me, and I looked in the spreadsheet in the back, and I went to Appendix B, and I probably need a magnifying glass to read the 2-point font, and I go in there and I say, okay, I found a box. And the box says something like 10%. And I'm like, ooh, what is this 10%? I trace my finger back over to the left. It will say, percentage of customers that sign up for the free trial. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Yeah. Here's my claim. That is not the kind of assumption that should be buried in 2-point font in Appendix B. That is a leap of faith assumption upon which our entire business depends. How do I know? What happens to your beautiful spreadsheet if I change that 10 to a 0? Think it through, right? What happens to every other number in the spreadsheet? They all magically go to 0 too. This is not talking about this is not sensitivity analysis for those MBAs, right? We're talking about like gross negligence analysis. If the number is 0, we have no business whatsoever. That should be in giant red letters on a poster on our wall. We can't get at least 10% of customers to sign up for the free trial. We are dead. So if that's a leap of faith assumption buried in your business plan somewhere, my claim is that wouldn't you want to know what that number is right now? Right? Would it make sense to build what we call a minimum viable product, an experiment designed to figure out what that sign-up rate is today, not a month from now, not a year from now, not 3 years later after we've already launched the product, but right now, today. So if you think about it, signing up for the free trial, by definition, requires you not to have used the product yet. Otherwise, you're not signing up for the free trial, right? So we know we can get people to sign up for the free trial right now. We don't have to have the product at all for that part of the experiment. So we call that establishing the baseline. Just let's go find out what the number is right now. Most entrepreneurs find this idea terrifying because we're worried that when we do this, we're going to get bad news. And we all know that bad news can kill startups because it can damage morale. We don't want to admit to our investors that, hey, remember that 10%? It's actually 0%, but still give us money, right? That's scary. But I say we should celebrate getting a 0% and filling in that box with real data because it's better to have bad news that's true rather than good news that we just made up. Right now we know where we actually are, and so it's like you can't get where you're going if you don't know where you are. So we found our location on the map. That's a success. We should celebrate. And then for every one of those leap of faith assumptions in that spreadsheet, let's go get the real data right now, today, as soon as possible. And once we have a complete baseline, then we can move on to learning milestone number 2, which is let's see if we can tune the engine to go from that horrible baseline towards the ideal in the business plan. Right, so let's make over successive iterations. Let's keep making more experiments. Right, there's no reason to experiment with making the product engaging if we can't even get people to sign up for the free trial. So let's immediately start experimenting and improving our landing page. Let's improve the product. Let's improve whatever it is, thinking of each improvement as a new experiment designed to improve those key baseline behaviors. And we can measure on a cohort basis, not on a gross vanity metrics basis, on a cohort by cohort basis, are we actually getting closer to our ideal? And then we can have a meeting. We can decide, hey, is it time to pivot or should we persevere? Now, when you do this exercise, I predict you will have one of 2 results. Imagine that we did a monthly check-in with our cohorts, and we started out at 0%, supposed to be 10%. In scenario A, it goes something like 0%, 3%, 5%, 7% over the course of several months. Right? Now, that's a business that hasn't gotten to 10% and is not viable yet, but you're going to feel pretty good. You're like, you know what, the experiments we're doing, they feel like they're getting us on track. We're on, seem like we're making progress. Let's keep going. Now, here's scenario B. 0%, 5%, 5.5%, 5.7%, 5.75%, 5.79%. See what's happening? Hit that nice asymptote? When I meet companies that are doing that, they're often celebrating. So they're like, look, the numbers are all up and to the right, so we're on track. And if you don't look at it this way, if you haven't set a specific target, you won't realize that you're up and to the right into the land of the living dead. So this is a framework for helping us evaluate if we're making, not just are we making any progress at all, but are we making enough progress to give us confidence that our strategy actually works. And that actually is the number 1 indicator that it's time to pivot, is when our experiments hit that point of diminishing returns. See, all of us have been trained in our regular jobs. Anyone who's worked in a regular job before they went to work at a startup, we all got trained that when we do incremental effort, we get incremental results. So if we were trained as a designer, we learned how to make products easier to use. Engineers make them perform better. Marketers do better marketing campaigns, right? So whenever you make the product easier to use, that makes the conversion rates and the customer behaviors a little bit better. But when we're building something that nobody wants, making it easier to use just makes it easier for customers to realize that they don't want it. And it's actually a bad thing. Actually, damages our metrics. And that's the problem, is we all have this intuition about what actually works that is divorced from reality. And when you work this way, you pretty quickly become a conspiracy theorist. Okay? And here's why. When we first launched InView, we eventually got from no customers using our product to a small number of customers using our product because we were using this brand new technology at the time called Google AdWords. And in those days, you could have a marketing budget of $5 a day. I was the head of marketing. You can tell I suck at marketing because I thought $5 a day sounded pretty good. And for $5 a day in those days, you could buy 100 clicks per day because the minimum bid per click was 5 cents. So every day, 100 human beings were trying our product. And I at first thought, hey, probably like half of them will buy it. We're going to be in great shape. And of course, at the beginning, 0 of them bought it. And after painstaking work, making our product better, we eventually got to the point where every day we could get basically 1 person to buy our product. So we had a 1% conversion rate day in, day out. Now, if you think about that, in the language of science, that is a time-independent controlled trial. Every day we get an independent report card, how we do in that day, what's our conversion rate that day. And after several months, I became a conspiracy theorist. It's like, wait a minute. We're making the product better and easier to use and fixing bugs every day, and yet every day the conversion rate is rock solid 1%. And I started to feel like, are today's customers on a conference call with yesterday's customers? Like, hey, everybody, how many of you bought? Okay, 1? Okay. Because like, how could it be so consistent? Doesn't make sense. But no, there's no conference call. There's no conspiracy. It's just that the things that we think make the product better don't. Our customers do not agree with us that the product is getting better because little optimizations like fixing bugs or making it easier to use don't matter if the fundamental value proposition is wrong. Does that make sense? So that's how you know it's time to pivot. But if you don't set up your accounting this way, you won't be able to tell because the vanity metrics, the kind of metrics you put in your press release in the hopes of making your competitors feel bad, those numbers are up and to the right the whole time. You have to kind of use this alternate way of looking at your numbers. It's like having X-ray vision for what's really going on, not the nonsense you want the press to write. I'll make one last suggestion while we're here, which is that let us treat the meeting where we decide whether to pivot as a milestone in its own right. Most of the time, when people have a meeting about whether it's time to pivot, it's in the worst possible scenario. It's the night before a board meeting. The money is running out, right? We were waiting for Zool, right? And Zool has not arrived. Everything is going to hell. Customers are not behaving correctly. The servers are on fire. The roofs are caving. The walls caving in. The roof is crumbling. And it's like, okay, is there any kind of thing we can pull out at the last minute to save our butts, right? That's like, think about that as, you know, a meeting environment not exactly conducive to rational thought, right? Not the best thinking doesn't happen there. But my claim is, if we know for sure that we're going to have to pivot, let's just schedule the meeting in advance. Okay? Let's just be like, you know what? Every 6 weeks or 8 weeks, let's put a meeting on the calendar, the pivot or persevere meeting. And that single act dramatically changes the prospects of our startup. Because first of all, now we can have a calm, rational conversation about is our strategy working without having to have a panic, without compromising the morale of our employees, because it's no big deal. It's just a routine matter we do every few weeks. And the best part is now we can work backwards. If 8 weeks from today you were to have a meeting where you were going to evaluate whether your strategy was fundamentally working or not, you could say, well, what information would I want to have in the room at the time in order to make a good decision? And if I'm working on something today that won't give me that information in the next 8 weeks, it's actually a form of waste. So sending out a press release to try to get a bunch of customers, is that actually going to help me learn if my strategy works? I don't think so. What's the learning value of the 101st customer who tells you your product sucks? Right? Remember like 3 customers in a row who hate your product? Hated my product? Right? Is that a statistically significant sample? We don't need a press release for that. Right? Small numbers can actually go a long way. This whole system is about creating micro-scale experiments that have predictive power of what is going to happen in the future. It's a completely different way of accounting than our traditional accounting, which is all backwards looking. Does that make sense? If you read the book, you can learn that I actually believe we can take the concept of product market fit and put it on a quantitative footing. So we can say objectively, not just do we have product market fit, but are we getting closer to product market fit? And then we can evaluate ourselves and the startups that we hold accountable with an objective set of data that says whether they're actually learning or not. And then, if we're on the flat part of the hockey stick, we can actually tell with certainty if it's about to turn up or not. Now that involves a lot of math, and I don't have a whiteboard, and I don't have enough time to get into, so you'll have to look it up on your own. All of this is in the service of changing the way that startups are built. That's what I want you to join me in doing. Because people's time and energy, their creativity, their passion, is too precious of a resource to be wasted. I actually think our industry is guilty of criminally negligent waste of people's potential. Every person who works on a death march project that's doomed from the start, every time a giant company launches a product that they worked on for years and pulls from the marketplace after a matter of weeks, those are preventable errors that should never happen. And although, you know, there's so many of you here and on the live stream, it can feel like, wow, Lean is all cool now and everyone already knows about Lean Startup. Actually, you are all very early adopters of this way of thinking. And so you have the opportunity to join with us in advancing the state of the art in entrepreneurship. See, what we know right now about how to build these kinds of companies that are built to learn from the ground up, that can be experimental in everything they do, is the tiniest tip of the iceberg. When we look back at Fred Taylor's time, we laugh that those people didn't even know how to run a factory, let alone a global supply chain. They seemed like children to us, stupid. They didn't know even the basics of management. But decades from now, when people look back at our time, at the way that we build new products, the way that we build new startups, they will laugh at us because what we do now is no better than astrology, is voodoo product development. And we can and must do better. So I had to leave a bunch of questions unanswered because we only had limited time today, like how specifically do you know it's time to pivot? What is the relationship between vision, strategy, and product? What specifically should we measure? How do we get products to grow? How do we tell if we're creating value? My absolute favorite question Is it possible that we could go faster as our company scales, or is bureaucracy our inevitable destination? Now, I left these questions unanswered intentionally because I don't know if you guys have noticed, but there's this amazing book that just came out. And of course, I want you to read it. I am incredibly grateful that you have spent this time with me today. Thank you all very much for coming. I hope that you will all be in touch. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.